Morning students. Again today we are going to discuss about third chapter from chemistry, that is metals and non-metals. So today we are going to discuss about the ionic compounds. Few topics already we have covered, isn't it or not? So today we are going to discuss about the ionic compounds. Okay. So what are ionic compounds? So before going to study about ionic compounds, you should know what is ions. What are ions? Means already in 9th class we have studied, but once again I am reminding you what are ions. Ion means an ion is electrically charged. Electrically charged atom is known as ion. Isn't it or not? Means atom, if we are talking about atom, they will be having equal number of positive charges and negative charges. Isn't it or not? Equal number of protons and electrons. So atom is neutrally charged. But ion means if that atom is electrically charged. If an atom is having either more number of electrons or less number of electrons, that atom we will call it as ion. Isn't it or not? So ions are generally of two types. One is positive ion. Second one is negative ion. So this positive ion, another name is cation. And negative ion, another name is anion. What is cation? Already of course we have studied. Cation means, for example, if an element, okay, if an element has 1, 2 or 3 electrons in the outermost shell, of its atom, then it loses these electrons to achieve inert gas electron arrangement of 8 valence electrons and forms positively charged ion. Means if any element, actually generally what do you mean by inert gas electronic arrangement of 8 valence electrons means, we know around the nucleus the electrons will be revolving in their orbits, isn't it or not? Means in its outermost shell, okay, if there are 8 electrons, that type of atom will have stability. Inert gas electron configuration means in its outermost shell, if it is having 8 electrons, that type of atoms will have stability. If they are having either less than 8 electrons or more than 8 electrons, means nearest to 8 electrons, means sometimes they will lose the electrons or sometimes they will gain the electrons to get the stability. Nothing but to get this 8 electrons, some atoms will lose the electrons or some atoms will gain the electrons to get the stability. Okay, so like that, if any element has 1 or 2 or 3 electrons, up to 3 electrons only its capacity is there. Means if 3 electrons in the outermost shell, okay, if an element has either 1 or 2 or 3 electrons in the outermost shell, then it loses these electrons. Its electrons to achieve inert gas arrangement of 8 valence electrons. I will tell you the example so that you will understand. If we are talking about sodium, okay, sodium atomic number is 11. So sodium will have in first shell how many electrons? 2 electrons. In second shell its capacity is 8 na. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons. Okay, so in now actually its atomic number is 11. 11 means 11 electrons will be. These are 2 plus 8, 10. Here 11. Okay, see in its outermost shell how many electrons are there? Only one electron is there, isn't it or not? So to get 8 electrons in this case, it cannot, no one can give 7 electrons here to get 8 electrons in this outermost shell, isn't it or not? Means to get 8 electrons in this shell, it requires 7 more electrons or not? So no one will give 7 electrons. Maximum their capacity is either they can lose 3 electrons or they can gain 3 electrons. More than 3 they cannot leave or they cannot gain. So here in this condition they cannot, no one is ready to give 7 electrons here. So better what it will do? It will lose this electron. When it loses this electron, what happens? Now this shell will be collapse, isn't it or not? So this one will be the outermost shell. See here, now it get 8 electrons or not? Yes, now it is getting stability because of getting 8 electrons in the outermost shell. That's why we will call, as it is losing the electrons, sodium will lose the electrons, we will tell sodium is a cation. All the metals, generally all the metals have capacity to lose the electrons. Okay, then what is anion then? What is anion? Same thing. If an element has 1 or 2 or 3 electrons in the outermost shell of its atom, then it gains these electrons. It gains electrons to achieve. Means, here what is anion means? Here just wait, I am telling what is anion. If an element is instead of here 5 or 6 or 7 electrons. What is anion? If an element has either 5 or 6 or 7 electrons in the outermost shell of its atom, then it gains the remaining electrons to achieve inert gas electron arrangement of 8 valence electrons and form negative charge ion. For example, here I am telling the best example is chlorine for anion. Okay, it is for anion example. So chlorine number is 17. So chlorine, okay. Here in first orbit 2. Here again 8. In third shell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 plus 8, 10. 10 plus 7, 17. Here in its outermost shell, how many electrons are there? 7 electrons are there. To get this 8 valence electrons in its outermost shell, how many electrons it requires? Only 1 electron. So it will accept 1 electron from someone to get the stability. Understand? So that's why we will call it as chlorine is an anion. Chlorine will always accept electrons. That how many electrons? 1 electron. Since it is having 7 electrons in its outermost shell, it will accept 1 electron. So the anion, chlorine we will consider as anion. Okay. Even for accepting also, only the any atom can accept only 3 electrons, not more than that. Clear? So all the non-metals have comes under anions and all the metals comes under cations. Most of the non-metals comes under anion. Clear, children? This is about positive ions and negative ions. Okay, then if we will see ionic bond, then what are ionic compounds? Generally ionic bond means, see here what is ionic bond. Ionic bond. So the chemical bond, what is ionic bond? The chemical bond formed by the transfer of electrons, from one atom to another, is known as ionic bond. Means from one atom to another, if the electrons are transferring. Okay, the chemical bond means whatever bond is forming by the transfer of electrons from one atom to another, that bond we will call it as ionic bond. One type of bond will be formed when the electrons will transfer from one atom to another. Generally here ionic bond will always forming between metals and non-metals. Metals and non-metals. We are telling always metals will give the electrons. We are telling always non-metals will accept the electrons from metals, isn't it or not? So like the losing and gaining is happening between metals and non-metals or not. So when the type of transfer is happening, now one type of bond will be forming. That bond, that chemical bond is nothing but we will call it as ionic bond. Okay, then what are ionic compounds then? Nothing but simply ionic compounds means ionic compounds. Simple, the compounds formed by the ions. The compound formed by the ions are known as ionic compounds. If we will see examples, first one we are taking formation of sodium chloride, how sodium chloride will be formed. Okay, so we are telling that sodium, now only I have shown you, sodium will have 11 electrons, isn't it or not? 11 electrons and 11 protons. So its electronic configuration will be 2, 8, 1. So in its outermost shell, how many electrons are there? See, always we will mention dot here. Nothing but this dot represent number of electrons in its outermost shell. We will represent only electrons present in its outermost shell. Here in outermost shell of sodium, how many electrons are present? 1 electron. So I am representing 1 dot here. Okay. So ion means to get its stability. Okay, inert gas configuration, it will lose this 1 electron or not? Losing. So minus. So finally we will get Na plus. Okay, 2 and 8. Clear? So 1 electron we have taken, so it is. Then you come to chlorine. Chlorine electronic configuration is 2, 8, 7. Isn't it or not? So we should represent number of electrons in its outermost shell. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 1. Okay. So to get stability, what we will do? 1 electron we will add or not? Yes. So when we are adding 1 electron, what it will get? So it will get minus charge. This is sodium ion. This is sodium ion. This is chloride ion. So now how it happens between sodium and chlorine? 1 dot here and 7 dots here. So this 1 electron will go there, and so finally we will get Na plus Cl minus, or also simply you can write NaCl. Clear children? So this is the formation of NaCl. 1 electron from sodium will be given to the chlorine, and finally it will get, and we will get NaCl. So in if for example we want to see in there this form, again here also 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, here 1 plus here chlorine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this one, whatever electron will be there, it will go here. So finally we will get sodium 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Chlorine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is the formation of sodium chloride. Clear children? Yes. So this is the first example of ionic compound NaCl, and one more I will tell, that is KCl. KCl also same. In its outermost shell 1 electron will be there, and here chlorine, again same thing is happening here, 7 more electrons in its outermost shell. So this one will be going there. So finally you will get K dot Cl minus, or you can also write it as KCl. Same as it is here also. Clear, children? So these are some of the examples of ionic compounds in your textbook. 3 to 4 examples given, so you can go through those examples how they form. Clear? So this is about the formation of ionic compounds. So last one is properties. Last topic is properties of ionic compounds. Properties of ionic compounds, actually which type of properties they will have. So first property of ionic compound is they are usually crystalline solids. They are usually crystalline solids. Example, NaCl. NaCl we are using in our house, isn't it or not? Salt. A salt, if you are observing closely, each and every crystals will be there. Salt crystals will be there or not? So like that, whatever ionic compounds will consider all the solids, whatever ionic compounds we are observing they look solids, that in which shape? Crystalline solids. Okay, and second one is they will be having high melting and boiling points. What they will be having? High melting points and high boiling points. Means if you want to melt salt, you know what is the melting point of salt? That is 800 degrees centigrade. And if you know boiling point, it is 1413 degrees centigrade for salt. Means for melting salt, just you heat the salt. Can you able to melt it? No, we are unable to melt it. Means if we are supplying 800 degrees centigrade, then only the salt will start melting. If we want to boil the salt, it requires 1413 degrees centigrade of heat. So generally all the ionic compounds will have high melting and boiling points. And third one is they are usually soluble in water. They are usually soluble in water and insoluble in organic solvents. Insoluble in organic solvents. Organic solvents means like alcohol. Okay, alcohol, ether, acetone. These are some of the organic solvents. If we are talking about ionic compounds, they will be, for example, salt only. Best example is salt. If you are dissolving salt in water, it will be dissolved or not? Yes, like that. All the like copper sulfate, like that, some salts are there. They are easily soluble in water, but they are insoluble in organic solvents like these things: ether, alcohol, acetone, like that, even kerosene, like that. Clear, children? And fourth property is they are good conductors of electricity. They are good conductors of electricity when dissolved in water. Okay, so when we are dissolving in water, these salts will dissociate into ions. Okay, when they are dissociating to ions only will conduct the electricity or not? So, yes. So since all the ionic compounds will have ions, that too in solid state they cannot conduct the electricity. When they dissolved in water, then only they can dissociate into ions, and then only they will conduct the electricity. In dry solid state, they cannot conduct the electricity. Clear, children? So these are the four main properties of the ionic compounds. Clear? So up to here, read thoroughly, make your notes. Okay, so we have discussed about ionic compounds, ionic bond, ionic compounds, properties of ionic compounds, and what are ions. So up to here, make your notes. Read the textbook thoroughly. If you have any doubts, just you can ask me. Thank you.